Hi there, welcome to a session on Indigenous Perspectives, sharing our stories and learning together. We wanted to give you a bit of an introduction for who we are and what we're doing. We're a group of Indigenous and non-Indigenous colleagues who just want to help Canadians to learn more about the history and experiences of Indigenous peoples, as well as unpack a bit of the context around contemporary issues and interests. We recognize this is a complex area with lots of different perspectives, and so we see an opportunity to help share some of our stories and experiences, and to help people and organizations connect the dots in terms of the work that they do and the way they live their lives in Canada and towards advancing reconciliation. So we'll start with a bit of an introduction. I'm Anne Harding, and I'm pleased to live and work in Treaty 7 territory in Calgary, Alberta. My heritage is Welsh and Swedish, and I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to have spent the last 15 years working and learning with Indigenous colleagues, mostly in this territory, but also across the country. So thanks very much, everybody, and we'll pass it over to Steve for an introduction.
Hi there, my name is Stephen Francis. I live and work in Calgary. I'm a consultant trainer, a bit of an educator. I conduct workshops, presentations regarding Aboriginal or Indigenous issues. I'm Cree, I'm First Nation, I'm from Southwest Saskatchewan. So I'm 52 years old, I've lived a few years, I've seen things, I've been involved with issues. I've worked with Métis people, First Nations people, or Indians, and even on a few projects with respect to Inuit people. So I want to share what I've learned, what I think, and hopefully some useful suggestions and tips for anyone that wants to inform themselves, be better knowledgeable when it comes to Indians, First Nations, Métis, and even Inuit people.
Thanks a lot, Steve. And Art, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, good day, folks. My name's Art Cunningham. I'm a Métis and Cree and Danish heritage. I'm very fortunate to have been raised in a very strong Indigenous Métis family. Fortunate, I mean by always knowing who I was and where my background was, and very proud of who I was. I spent the last 35 years in the resource sector, everywhere from an Indian liaison to an Aboriginal liaison, now to Indigenous practitioner, I think was my last title when I left and retired from the industry. But I've also served close to over 20 years in volunteer sector in a lot of different areas around children family services, community friendship centers, etc., like that. So what I'd like to give back is that experience, those learnings, as I speak to making those mistakes and learning from them, is because the funny thing, when I first started, you can make a mistake, but nobody noticed that mistake because nobody had done it before, I guess you could say. So, but you learn to know what mistakes you made and learn to refine what you needed to refine to go down better directions. So that's what I hope to bring, that experience, that knowledge, and the many, many different stories that I've had to take those stories from the community and turn them into what people could look at a desktop to understand the impact or relevance to their access to land endeavors. So thank you. I look forward to sharing some of those stories with you and sharing that common perspectives with our colleagues.
Awesome, thanks, Art. And now we've had Tania as well join us. So Tania, could you offer a bit of an introduction?
For sure, thanks, Anne. So my name is Teneya Gwin. I am sixth generation Métis from the Cunningham clan, and I'm also a descendant from the Michelle band here in central northern Alberta-ish. So I identify as a Métis woman. and I'm very proud to represent that. For my professional career, I've worked a variety of different sectors as a consultant. I've worked for transportation, I've done land use planning, I've even worked in the library. So I have my own consulting firm, and I work on a lot of facilitation when it comes to history, Canada's history with Indigenous people. So that's where I'm at today, and very happy to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Tania. So the first topic that we thought we might explore today is the term economic reconciliation, or Indigenous economic reconciliation. So in 2015 in Canada, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released 94 calls to action and their full report on the inquiry into Indian residential schools. And from this, I think the term reconciliation came a lot more into the public arena, and people were talking about it a lot more. I think it holds a lot of baggage with it. It holds a lot of complexity. Not everybody knows what it means. People have different understandings of the term. And then we also have sort of different types of reconciliation that we're starting to hear talked about more. And so specifically, if we're looking to focus a bit on understanding economic reconciliation, what would that mean for you? And so I'll ask Steve to share a few words first, and then Art to fill in with some comments.
Well, Indigenous reconciliation for me, is about Indigenous people, First Nations, Métis, Inuit, participating in the economy in a more fulsome way than they are right now. But it's also about recognizing their history and how they had a way to use the land, they had rights, and they were doing a moderate livelihood and building a lifestyle, building a local economy based on land use, based on Aboriginal and treaty rights. Unfortunately, it's only been recently, I would say the last 20 years generally, when governments, industry, corporations, businesses are realizing that Indigenous people or Aboriginal people should be participating in the economy more so that their social conditions improve, because the status quo would keep too many Indigenous communities in a state of poverty. So for me, Indigenous reconciliation or Indigenous economic reconciliation is about better participation when it comes to natural resource development, when it comes to business, when it comes to the ability to earn revenue from Canada's resources and to share in the prosperity on a go-forward basis. That's Indigenous economic reconciliation for me.
My turn. I look at it as Indigenous economic reconciliation to me points to a process. It points to an action. And rather than me starting out with trying to define it, it points to me that whoever this is relative to, that if I'm involved, I need to have a discussion with what it's relative to. What does that mean to that individual, that group, that family, or that community, or that nation? It always intrigues me that that the importance of the process of where the individual or people that you want to have that discussion with what it does mean to them. I know what it means to me as an individual, and again, as I did my opening, I've been fortunate enough to come from a strong family where I didn't face as many barriers as a lot of individuals or a lot of Indigenous people have faced throughout the years, but I'm certainly aware of them, and certainly impacted through families who have faced them, continue to face them. And so, but where it's relevant to me is when I talk about Indigenous economic reconciliation, it's more of a process to find out what that means to the people that are impacted than it is to try to define it and then figure out who fits under it. So that's really what it means to me when I hear that.
So thanks, Art and Steve, for those comments. And as Tania was listening to this piece, she went, "Oh no, I have something to add here too." And so, Tania, I'll invite your perspective on Indigenous economic reconciliation. So what does that term bring up for you?
Yeah, just listening to Steve and Art talk, I thought back to, basic history. And what I was thinking about was the Indian Act. And one of the things within the Indian Act was designed basically so Indigenous people could not take part in Western society and the economics that were happening. So the different business opportunities and what you could sell, etc., were controlled and managed by the federal government. And this is still happening today. And then from a Métis perspective, I thought, well, what about the road allowance people? This was a time that the Métis were not being recognized, and there's a lot of racism happening, and between not being accepted into the First Nations type of government strategy and how they were segregating us, and then also being not part of what the Western world and the newcomers coming and making settlements. So they were living on these road allowance, and a lot of time the racism ended in poverty and trying to participate in the economics that were happening around them. So after I was listening to Steve and Art, I was like, hey, yeah, like if you think about this from a history perspective, everything has been designed for Indigenous people not to fail and not to thrive in the Western world and the economies that are happening. So in my opinion, economic reconciliation would mean breaking down these barriers, making it known that this legislation, the Indian Act, is still in place to this day, and there's boundaries and limitations that some First Nations are met with to this day to participate in the economics that are happening around us.
Yeah, I think knowledge is power, right? And I think a lot of Canadians, many who I meet and teach with, don't understand that history. We haven't been taught that history. And so we don't recognize that there's actually, like, you can talk about systemic racism as sort of this, I think, conceptual thing, but it was legislated, racism and oppression and exclusion from the mainstream economy through the Indian Act and through government policies of assimilation for over 100 years in Canada. And so I think that leaves a legacy, that leaves us in a place where we are today, where there are socioeconomic disparities between Indigenous and other peoples in this country. And so I think you're right. I think just even learning about that and understanding that this is a concrete reality and it didn't just happen, it came from intentional exclusion, is really powerful. And I think so powerful for organizations and governments to learn more about, so that they can look at their own structures and their own decision-making processes and say, hey, how might this be excluding Indigenous people, or how could we adapt this to be intentionally inclusive? And I don't think, I think a lot of Canadians sometimes see specific Indigenous initiatives as like giving a leg up to Indigenous companies or workers. And really, I think it's recognizing there were, like, we started here, then there was countless government policies that created this disparity. And really, it's just about getting us back to a level playing field where there can be that economic participation as a person wants it, like on our own terms, from Indigenous perspectives and from Western perspectives.
Yeah.
Thanks. So thanks everyone. Hope you enjoyed that, that snippet on Indigenous economic reconciliation. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are a group of colleagues who are interested in helping Canadians to learn through the stories and experiences and perspectives that we hold. So we hope that you'll check out some other sessions that we've recorded, or consider giving us a call or sending an email and having us come and speak to your organization, or to have a custom workshop for you. You can find us at forumrelations.com/perspectives. So we hope to hear from you soon and hope you enjoyed this. Thanks a lot.